This module is the operating infoMAX tutorial. What we will do here is look at a few items we've talked about that we haven't shown that you probably need to see to really understand how they work. The first thing we're going to talk about is synchronizing or syncing. Remember that synchronizing is what happens to a record that you enter or update. It goes to the centralized server and then gets synchronized out to other clients, other MaxTech users who have permissions to that record. Likewise, if somebody else enters a record or updates a record, it gets synchronized to the server, then gets synchronized on out to you, provided that you have permissions. Now, there are times when you want to have records that only remain on your machine, local to you, that don't go to the server, and of course then wouldn't be able to go on to other clients. For instance, doctor's appointments, things like that you want to keep private, or maybe you want to keep track of a handful of people, that are personal contacts or something like that. Sharing is the way that's accomplished. So what I'm going to show you here, starting out in the calendar, is shared events. As you see here, this is a shared calendar event. It shows up in this gray color, whereas an unshared event, a private event, say a doctor's appointment, shows up in this gold color. Now, one thing important to realize is that once you share an item, it's gone out. There's no way you can recall that by unsharing it. The only way to recall it is to delete it and then recreate it as an unshared item, or copy it as a new item that's unshared, then delete the original. There's a way to do that. So let's look at this unshared item here. Sorry, the shared item. This hand here is depressed. There's nothing I can do to change it back and forth. Additionally, there's this little flag here because sometimes it's a little bit hard to see if this hand has been depressed. This little pull down here that tells you if it's shared or not. Additionally, of course, like we talked about, if it's gray, it's shared. So that's what we're looking at here is a calendar item. Now here's an unshared item. We're going to change this name here to doctor appointment. And see, it says private. Now, if we go in here and we share it by clicking this button, I can click, unclick, click. But as soon as I save it and it's shared, see how it's depressed there? You're going to see here it's going to change from this gold color to the gray color. And now it shows as shared, and this button is deactivated. So now everybody can see this doctor's appointment. Now if you want to recreate this like I talked about, what you can do is go to this button here, copy item, or edit, copy item, unshare it, delete this original one, edit, delete item, and now we're left with this unshared private item again. How do other records look? So open up this bot. Everything is shared by default. Once they're shared again, you can't unshare them. Here, there's not that little private unshared flag in there. It's just purely the button. It's really the calendar that will be unshared probably the most often, so I tried to make it obvious there. So that is the sharing function. Synchronizing, the way things actually get synchronized, the way to force it is to click this little synchronize button, sync with work group, or, oops, I thought it was there, home, sync work group there. Additionally, every several minutes, depending on how things are set up, a sync is automatically processed for you. Now, one bug that we've been having that depends on internet, how good the internet connection is, that sort of thing, is if things get flaky, Commence stops syncing. So the way to get it synchronizing again is to close it down and reopen. And I recommend doing that probably just a couple times a day, just to be safe that you're staying synchronized with your data. So the other question is backing up your data. What happens is you can force a backup by going to this logo, Open Managed Database, and then clicking the backup on the active database. Or every time you close your database, you could just X out to close out, and you see it here backing up. And it saves that right on the C drive in your root directory as a .xfr file. So I'm going to open up infoMAX again. And we're going to talk just a little bit about documentation, kind of where to go for help. One thing we've talked about is that almost everywhere in the database, when you open up the detail forms, it's a detail forms where it actually has the fields where you type in the data. As you see, when you hover it tells you what to put in. For instance, location. It's a two-letter state code. You don't write Illinois or Wisconsin or Massachusetts. You just write IL, WI, that kind of thing. So each place you hover over, it's going to give you an explanation. So that's kind of the first place to go. Notice what's there. Another place to go is the frequently asked questions view right here, the FAQ view. And there are facts about some ABCs, some basics that we've gone over here. And then for every category, there is an entry named with that. Talks about permissions, talks about preferences, optional settings to customize it the way you want, working with sold data, and it talks about synchronizing. So you can read in here the detailed instructions and the rationale for each of the categories and views that are talked about in here. If you have general questions about commence and how it works, as is typical almost all programs, you go to the help and you can do basically go to the index here and look up different topics you have questions on. If you have questions about views, here's a whole bunch of different topics about views that you can read about. A couple things we have in grid display mode. This explains about grid display mode and that kind of thing. And then the last thing is if you actually want that data in PDF form, it is hidden in the program directory under your C drive, program files, commence RM as a program, and then if you sort by type for Adobe Acrobat here, the main one is the user guide here that you would open up and be able to read it in a PDF format. It makes it more readable if you're interested in doing that. So that concludes the tutorial on the basic operations of infoMAX.